How's it going, everybody? My name is Box from Box and Jackalope, and today we're back on another episode of the Kun-Lai Campfire with my good friend Skull Shorties. Next week we're gonna have Jakai back on. This episode tonight was spur of the moment with me and Skull, and it was really late. We're actually recording this at like midnight, and Kai had to work in the morning, but he's gonna be back next week. But welcome, Skull.
It has been a century. Actually, I wanna go ahead and pull up when the last one was. This is gonna be entertaining.
I think it was like, gosh, I know it was like June or was it before June? I don't know. It was a while.
I'm looking at it now.
I think it was about Sylvanas. Like the thumbnail had like Sylvanas.
Yeah, our last one was 7 months ago.
So it's been a year without me and Skull. I know you guys have not been able to survive without us, but we're back with more lore speculation. And we're gonna be, since Shadowlands has been like a little dry right now, we're gonna be doing like one of the future topics we have is like what expansion we think is gonna be next, like with a world revamp, like what we would want. But today we're gonna start with like a classic Box and Skull episode and talk about the Warchiefs of the Horde. And we're actually gonna start off with like our favorite Warchief, and then we're gonna go into like the 4 of them, and then we're gonna end the podcast with which order we think was best to worst. If you guys watch us, you probably like know that already, but I guess I'll start off, Skull, really quick with like my favorite Warchief and why. And for me, it's a close tie between Garrosh, Vol'jin, and Thrall. But I'm not gonna lie, guys. I think my favorite Warchief has to be Garrosh Hellscream. I think that orc has created some of the most interesting storylines we have had in World of Warcraft. I love the amount of discussion we have about Garrosh Hellscream. A lot of people hate him, a lot of people love him. A lot of people love that he's very true to himself, as we saw at the end of Shadowlands. Would have I liked to see more in Shadowlands from Garrosh? Yes. That being said, what we got was pretty cool. But Garrosh in his time as Warchief, I think he had a lot of, I know they had that quest line where they talk about how he had a lot of potential, but I really like how he just kind of had a not give a shit attitude about certain situations. In a way, he was kind of Hoosian when you think about it. He's a consequentialist. He would do stuff that would have repercussions afterwards. As mentioned in a video I remember our friend Crucial made years ago, Garrosh was a masterful tactician. That was the word he used. And he was terrifying on the battlefield to the Alliance. And that was so cool. I don't think there's a lot of characters that really would beat him in a Muck-Garot outside of Thrall or other characters, to be honest, because he's such a good warrior. I think what happened with his villain arc was interesting. It was really interesting to see a Warchief kind of not cave under pressure, but be so set on his ideals that he alienated his allies. He committed heinous crimes, but he stood by everything he did up until he died twice. But Garrosh, I think, had he went that route in Stone Talon Mountains, I apologize if I'm going in circles, because that's kind of like what Garrosh's character is. It's all over the place, but we all love him for that. I think that Stone Talon Garrosh, had he continued to grow from that moment, because I mean, people have said it wasn't supposed to be canon, but it is still canon. Had he still continued to grow from that moment, I think he would have been the coolest Warchief we could have had in the Horde. And I think poetically it would have made sense for him to die in Legion had he went that route. But what we got, very interesting dude, very evil dude. And it's crazy because if you do look at alternate timelines, Garrosh could have gone in many different ways, looking at Skull's Rexxar series, if Rexxar was Warchief in Cataclysm. There's a lot of different ways that character could have gone. But overall, he's one of my favorites in Warcraft. So Skull, I went on a rant. I'm gonna let you go on a rant now about your favorite Warchief. You can criticize everything I just said if you'd like.
I mean, if you want me to criticize you, I can. I mean, as somebody who has, I like Garrosh. He is a very fun character, and a very, it's kind of funny because of your choice. Because for my favorite Warchief was Thrall, and Thrall and Garrosh worked off each other extremely well in Wrath of the Lich King. It's one of those things that I wish we got actually more of. I mean, we definitely got it, but it was less of a buddy and like a buddy partner crime sort of situation. It was more of a I hate your guts sort of deal.
A lot of it too seemed to be like reactionary stuff to each other, like in books. We never really saw it in game, like before Siege of Orgrimmar.
Yeah, but we also got quite a bit of it during Wrath of the Lich King.
Right.
Like one of my favorite. Well, it's not my favorite, but it is among the best. Was the Ulduar trailer where you had Thrall and Garrosh interacting with Jaina Proudmoore, and then King Varian Wrynn, and you got to see the differences between Garrosh and Thrall, where Thrall was more like, control yourself, Garrosh, we got to pull together against this old god threat, and Garrosh is like, screw you, I'm gonna go fight King Varian Wrynn. He had his whole moment where he'd be like, a true war chief would never partner with cowards. It's like, that
was a good impression. That was a good impression, Skull. I'm sorry.
Thank you. I should apply myself more to voice acting, I guess. But yeah, my choice would be Warchief Thrall. A lot of that stems from the fact of that I played Warcraft 3, and I got to know Thrall by playing as him, and I got to experience him. I read the book fairly recently. It was a year ago. That's not really recently, but I read the book on his origins and how he started off as a nobody slave who was basically being tutored by Blackmore to one day lead the orcs, which would bite Blackmore in the future because he did that. But Thrall just to me embodies the best of the Horde, where most orc characters in other medias and franchises are these very generic baddies who have like really no personality to them but killing machines, while Thrall has way more depth. He has a voice of reason. He's very wise for his age. He's actually younger than Thrall. Bleh. He's younger than Garrosh.
Which is really
always weird.
Yeah.
It's really weird because Garrosh treats Thrall like a secondary father, and it's like, dude, you're older than him. What are you doing? I really adore the character of Thrall and what he meant for the Horde, basically.
He's kind of like the heart of the Horde, I feel like, Thrall.
Yeah, I know that Thrall says that Bane and the Tauren are the heart of the Horde, but for me, Thrall has always been the face of the Horde. He's always been, who I go back to. Like, Thrall and the orcs from Warcraft 3 were the sole reason why I fell in love with the Horde and the orcs in Warcraft. So it is very much an easy answer for me to say Thrall. Like, we would not have the Horde that we have today without Thrall. He is... I cannot stress how happy I was with Battle for Azeroth by bringing him back into the Horde, because for the longest time he was really just this neutral force for shamans for the most part, and he defended the world, and that's great. I loved him as the world shaman and the de facto leader of the orcs, but we barely got to see that. And with Battle for Azeroth and Shadowlands, it's kind of a return to form with him, where he's back to leading the orcs and he's back in the Doomplate again, which is so great.
Do you remember how cool it was too, the scene where he grabs that axe? And like the fact, like, I remember you and I were speculating about Thrall like in 9.1. Or like with like, oh, where's Sarfang going? And then we get that drop of Safe Haven and stuff in BFA. That was so good.
You meant 8.1.
8.1, okay. 8.1. Yeah, no, we were in Korthia at 9.1.
Yeah. I was gonna say, I don't remember us speculating about Sarfang and Thrall in Shadowlands. Otherwise, I think we'd be a little bit more happy.
Yeah.
Granted, there are good moments with Thrall in Shadowlands so far. It's actually
he's been one of the best parts. Yeah,
he's been the best parts, which it's so weird when people say that the Thrall and Jaina and Bolvar are taking up the spotlight in Shadowlands. What are you talking about? We barely get any of them.
I gotta put something on record, Skull. Just on record. It's still a shame, and you know what I'm gonna say. It's still a shame that Thrall never interacted with Garrosh directly. Even if it would just be him hearing him call him a coward, I think that would have been real.
Considering how far away he was from in the raid, he would have heard him echo that at the very least.
Garrosh is a loud dude, too.
I think the very least, if we're not gonna have Thrall and Garrosh like interact like voice by voice, I would have at least liked it if Thrall showed up with Nazgrim afterwards to look at the ashes and have a conversation about him, because Nazgrim looked up to Garrosh.
Ooh, that would have been so good. Yeah, because Nazgrim was in the raid too. Like,
yeah, they were Thrall and Nazgrim were basically right next to each other during that part in the raid. Like, they were not far away from Garrosh, and considering everything regarding Shadowlands, we might have just gotten cut content regarding Thrall and Garrosh reuniting, maybe.
I get that feeling for some reason. Like, I really do. Like, here's the thing, like, because I'm not bad-mouthing the quality of the cinematic when I say this, but it does seem like a little strange to have, like, it was a good cinematic, but it does seem strange to have, like, one person work on a cutscene like that.
I believe that's actually normal. That's like the norm for the cutscenes. Like, they usually have like one person work on a cutscene.
Oh, wow.
Kind of like their jobs, basically. Like, they go like, Paul, can you go over here and work on this cutscene of Rexar and Shen Stormstout bro-fisting each other?
And eating a pizza.
Yeah, here you go.
That's interesting, actually. I don't know too much about that part of, like, cinematic development, so forgive me for... I hope I didn't sound like I was bad-mouthing their work, because I thought it was really good.
I don't know the full picture either. I just am going by what I've seen so far. A lot of people on Twitter basically go, I made this cutscene all by myself, and it's like, whoa, that's really cool. Fun fact, the guy who made that Garrosh cutscene was the same one who made the Hadi Resurrection cutscene that I used for the outro for my channel. So.
Oh, really? That's actually really neat.
Yeah.
The cutscene was great for Garrosh. Like,
oh yeah, I know a lot of people badmouthed it and said that it should have been like 3D, like it was a Taron Gregory cinematic or something, which I would have loved that. Don't get me wrong, but I think a lot of people underestimate the amount of money and time that goes into those.
I can't even imagine.
Because, like, me and Box over here, we work on machinimas, and, like, those take us, like, months to do, and that's just, like, 2D stuff, while they're, like, I'm pretty sure, like,
they're probably coding and stuff, too.
I'm pretty sure the models are 3D, and the backgrounds they use are 3D. They do a bunch of camera work. It's crazy, but, yeah, the Garrosh cutscene itself was really good, but, yeah, I would have loved it if we would have gotten more Thrall and even Nazgrim interaction with him. So
I think now, Skull, just to keep things moving, we're at around 13 minutes here. I think we should talk about, and I might let you do this recap because you're, like, I love Thrall, but you're the Thrall guy. So, like,
I am the Thrall guy.
Talk.
I am also the Rexar guy, but yes.
We're going to talk about the job that all 4 Warchiefs did in their reign now. Okay? So, like, not like a full recap of everything, because that would be, like, the whole podcast for Thrall.
Yeah, that might take a long minute.
I want you to talk about the job that Thrall did and the legacy he left behind for the Horde. And we'll do that for everyone.
Right. I think that I can do that at least for Thrall. It seems like it would be a smart idea to let you do Garrosh, and then I guess we'll both kind of handle Vol'jin and Sylvanas.
We're going to talk about how we were let down by Vol'jin's reign, even though we love the guy.
Oh man, poor Vol'jin. Alright, but talking about our good old buddy Thrall, his whole thing started the moment that Ogrim Doomhammer died. Ogrim basically was a mentor towards Thrall, and he passed both his hammer and his armor and title to Thrall all at the same moment in the moments of his death. He saw a lot of potential in Thrall. He saw that spark that Durotan had, and he had a very large amount of respect for Thrall. For someone who was like only in his maybe late 20s, early 20s, he was very wise and very good for his years. And basically Thrall's first acts was, freeing the orcs from their internments, and then bringing his people over to Kalimdor by the voice of Medivh, and over there they met with the Darkspear trolls. They met with Sen'jin and Vol'jin and created a pact that would last forever, and save them from the island that was about to be sunk. Then they went over to the Barrens, where they met Karen and his mighty people, the Tauren, and they also developed a bond and a friendship that would last lifetimes.
They kicked some centaur ass, I remember.
Yeah, they kicked some centaur ass together. They found the Oracle, which ended up being Medivh, and Medivh encouraged Thrall and Jaina to work together to save Grom, which Grom is the father of Garrosh on here, although he's also known as Grommash. I don't think we can get copyrighted bombed, but that is apparently a big reason why his name got changed to Grommash, or why they just keep yelling Hellscream in Warcraft 3 Reforged. But, yeah, so they worked together with Jaina to save Grom's soul from being tainted by the Burning Legion, which was returning at the time. And they saved him. Of course, he ended up losing his life anyways to Manoroth, which, Thrall had to again see someone who he cared for die before him. And then, he went on to create the Horde. He went on to create Orgrimmar. He had a good old long little adventure with our good buddy Rexxar, who, took out Dalen Proudmoore. I won't get too much into that because Thrall really doesn't do much there, but he names Rexxar the champion of the Horde, and then he kind of sits in Orgrimmar for quite a while. He sends adventurers in Classic to do certain things here and there, but for the most part, Thrall takes a little bit of a seat. Quite literally, actually. But then things kind of kick up with Burning Crusade, where he finally reunites with his grandmother Gaia, and also meets Garrosh, who is the son of Grom, as I talked before. And he kind of gives a spark to Garrosh to encourage him to fight and not be depressed. And he, basically tells him the tale of how his father died and how his father was pretty great, which, he basically takes Garrosh back with him and sends him over to Northrend after Garrosh had a little bit of a spat with him. And there's a lot of back and forth between Thrall and Garrosh overall, but Thrall tried his best to kind of mentor Garrosh into being a good leader someday. I really think that Thrall was already kind of setting Garrosh up to 1DB Warchief, because I think that was kind of the time where Thrall really just kind of wanted to settle and not be the Warchief anymore, which, I don't think he really was, very vocal about that, because most of his life he was the Warchief. And for a while, it really was just, that was his life. He ended up helping Sylvanas retake the Wrathgate. He encouraged his forces to work with the Argent Crusade to train for the battle against Lich King. And things kind of started to slow down for Thrall at this point, where the Cataclysm was starting to happen, and Deathwing was going to return, and the elements were going crazy. They basically burned down Orgrimmar to the point where it needed to be reconstructed and rebuilt.
Isn't that so messed up to think about?
That Orgrimmar got burned down?
Yeah. It's not really talked about a lot. It's just
It really isn't, and that's one of the few instances where Rexxar came back to help defend the city, too. That does not happen often. I should stress that a lot. I know that this is me talking about Thrall, but it is really bizarre that Rexxar barely shows up again after taking on the title of Champion of the Horde. Anyways, so Thrall basically is like, alright, I'm gonna see why the elements are so pissed off and are not listening to me. I'm gonna go to Outlands to see, what they did when the elements weren't listening to them. So he goes to speak to basically the elemental lords of Outlands, and they basically tell him that the planet is dying and that he needs to do something about it. So he trains with Agra, comes back. I should stress that he basically gave Garrosh temporary titlement of Warchief at this time, but it was temporary. By the time that he comes back to basically pay Karen respect, because Karen had died while he was gone, he basically is like, yeah, I'm not gonna be Warchief anymore, and he takes the Doomplate off and settles for a very traditional cloth, and goes to become the World Shaman and recruit the goblins into the Horde. But that's the last thing I think he really does.
Yeah.
As Warchief, is bring the goblins to the Horde, because he still has, I never understood this, but for some reason he still has the title of Warchief when you're leveling in Kazan. So I guess that's, again, to me, that's his final time of being the leader of the
Yeah, because I think he
Horde.
sends them to Garrosh at the end of the zone.
Yeah, he does. He sends them to Garrosh, although they change it up a lot during the years. At one point it was Vol'jin, then it became Saurfang, and now it's, I think, Rokon. So yeah, it changes up quite a bit, but yeah.
I feel like canonically it's Garrosh.
Thrall did a lot more as Warchief, really, in Warcraft 3 than in WoW, but he still did a decent amount, and his legacy was really just being a very honorable and fair leader. He really, one of the things he really embodied was basically being very respectful towards the other races of the Horde. He wasn't like, orcs are everything, orcs are in charge, you're a filthy blood elf, screw you. No, Thrall was pretty nice about everything, really.
Even a blood elf can hold a blade.
Yeah, like, yeah, so like Thrall was just a really decent and good leader. He was the one who set up this new and honorable horde that had races just beyond just orcs.
So I think that takes us into our next favorite Warchief, Garrosh Hellscream. Unless you had any more you wanted to say about Thrall.
I don't think so. I mean, there's plenty to still say about him, but like, in terms of like being Warchief, that's kind of it. He does come back at least to kind of help out, but you know, his legacy was supposed to be Garrosh, which is really tainted, as we'll
get into.
Yeah.
So I'll start off with Garrosh's storyline a little bit. So Garrosh Hellscream was a veteran from Northrend. He was actually at the time very widely respected among the Horde because of this, which made him actually a popular candidate for Warchief. So it made sense for Thrall to do this at the time. One of my favorite pieces of artwork is actually when Thrall is giving him Gorehowl. I really like that one. But Cataclysm is when Garrosh had a lot of interesting development, and you can kind of start to see his descent in a lot of ways, but this is, I think, the form of Garrosh that a lot of players latched onto. So Garrosh in Stone Talon Mountains, let's start there, because there's so many different storylines with this guy in novels. I'm going to try and do a quick recap of like what I remember off the top of my head, so Skull, you can jump in if I screw up something. So in Stone Talon Mountains, Garrosh Hellscream has a general, Overlord Cromgar, who goes too far and starts murdering civilian druids at the top of the zone and at the end of the quest line. Garrosh Hellscream actually shows up and executes this general right in front of us, the player base, and basically tells us a lesson that he learned from Sarfang in Borean Tundra. To me, this is one of the coolest moments for Garrosh, because it showed him growing as a Warchief for the first time. Because I think in Cataclysm, we see him as very hot-headed and arrogant. From the start, he's threatening Vol'jin. He kicks Vol'jin and the Darkspear out of Orgrimmar. He goes to Silverpine and threatens Sylvanas, which, I mean, it's weird because, like, he had a point where there's no difference between her and the Lich King. But, like, at the same time, it was just him alienating his allies further and further. And he kind of, over time, just really kept alienating those that were advising him. The advisors that Thrall left for him, he was ignoring. But Garrosh had a following within the Orcs, which that will kind of lead us to the Mists of Pandaria storylines. Garrosh also, before we leave Cataclysm, recruited the Dragonmaw clan into the Horde temporarily, as we'll get into. But I thought that was a cool moment in Cataclysm. I always liked the intro to Twilight Highlands, where we kind of liberate them from their town, and then like the little Zeppelin part where they get shot down is pretty cool.
There's a really good line there. I'm sorry for interrupting.
Oh no,
go ahead. But there's a really great line from Morgor, or whatever his name is. He's the leader of the Dragonmaw at the time. He says, "Fine then, see where Hellscream takes you." It is a great line because for him, his Hellscream was Grom Hellscream, and as you know, Grom was the first one to drink the demon blood, and that encouraged the rest of the Horde to do the same. So it's a perfect line for Zayla because of everything that happens after Cataclysm, really.
So, on that note, Garrosh remains Warchief of the Horde during Cataclysm, and things will change right before Mists of Pandaria, where he does something so heinous that disgusts most of the Horde, the Bombing of Theramore. Now, granted, I did read in the book that Garrosh told the civilians to evacuate, but that doesn't change how many people Garrosh murders in this act. This was his big, I would say, burning of Teldrassil moment for him that really started to shift the power in the Horde. So in Mists of Pandaria, Garrosh sends us and a small squad to scout the land, and we actually end up working with one of his closest generals, General Nazgrim, who was Legionnaire Nazgrim in Cataclysm we quest with him, Bashir, just thought I'd point that out. But we go through Pandaria with Nazgrim until 5.1, where Garrosh makes landfall. In this patch is where Garrosh starts to go off the deep end. Beforehand, it's just the Bombing of Theramore, but in 5.1, Garrosh actually, at the start of it, has a pretty cool argument with Vol'jin, and me and my friend Kai, who's on this podcast, we talk about this, but the line where he's like, "I won't let my people starve in the desert," to Vol'jin was kind of cool. Like, he's willing to do bad things to help his people. In a different context, it would be a cooler line, but the path Garrosh went, he was only talking about the orcs. But in 5.1, Garrosh tries to assassinate Vol'jin, leading to the Dark Spear Rebellion later on in Mists of Pandaria. Vol'jin fakes his death, and that leads to Shadows of the Horde, which we can get into afterwards. But what basically ends up happening is tensions between the Horde and Garrosh come to a boiling point when he gets the heart of Y'Shaarj and denounces the rest of the Horde. During the Siege of Orgrimmar, we take out all of Garrosh's top lieutenants. Warlord Zayla actually escapes this encounter, but Malkarok, Nazgrim, they don't survive this. Garrosh just ended up taking prisoner... Well, sorry, let me go back a little bit. Garrosh gets into a dispute with Thrall, where Thrall keeps trying to talk him down, but Garrosh is so prideful, he's not going to do this. So Garrosh, we end up fighting Garrosh, we take him off the mantle of Warchief, and thus war crimes begins. Garrosh is then broken free from prison by Rathian in Mists of Pandaria. You know, Skull, I gotta say, saying Garrosh's storyline like this is absolutely nuts, because there's so much I am missing here. But basically, Garrosh escapes his trial, and he creates the Iron Horde in an alternate Draenor, and invades our reality, so we go there, and eventually, we fight off the Iron Horde to where Thrall is able to challenge Garrosh to a Mak'gora, thus ending his life. And for years, it was speculated the tone of that conversation between the two of them. I'm just gonna end it here because I don't want to talk about the Shadowlands stuff. But I always thought their conversation where Garrosh was blaming Thrall and then Thrall going back at him was so interesting. Skull has a good video about it, actually, if you guys ever wanted to watch it. But that Mak'gora is one of the best scenes in Warcraft. And I thought it was a fitting end for Garrosh as a character for Thrall to be the one to ultimately take him out, considering Thrall technically set him on that path, but Garrosh chose his own journey. But yeah, guys, that was, I would say a pretty bad recap of Garrosh. There are probably a lot better videos to describe him for you. He's a really interesting character, and I think he's one of those characters in Warcraft that's very interesting because he's flawed and has a lot of depth to him. But yeah, so that was a mouthful.
Yeah. I didn't know you were done. I didn't know if you were done or not.
No, I'm just gonna end it on basically he left a bad legacy in the Horde, and it basically people look on the Hellscream name with shame now, which I think is kind of a shame, and it's tragic because of what his father did. But it makes sense in the current Horde for people to not be proud of Garrosh at all.
Garrosh's essential legacy was, if you guys do this again, we're coming for you, which definitely happened with Sylvanas' legacy. That's a quite interesting when we get to her. But yeah, Garrosh, I see a lot of people, they say that Thrall is not a flawed character compared to Garrosh, and which I very much disagree with that notion that Thrall, as great as he was not perfect. And I think one of the biggest things was of how stubborn he was to put Garrosh on the mantle. He really wanted Garrosh to be the one to become Warchief, and he had so much confidence and belief that Garrosh could do this. He's actually one of the only leaders, I think, that was like, yeah, he can do this. Garrosh is the guy. I believe in him. And I really think what Garrosh needed more of was more confidence, more people telling him that he could do this, because of how many of the leaders that were like, you suck, You're terrible at this. I don't know why Thrall chose you. That made him basically bulk up and go, I can do this. I don't need to hear your opinions anymore. Screw you. And that basically led him to, you know, taking advice of others who agreed with him, like Malkarok, which Malkarok could be argued was worse than Garrosh.
Oh god, Malkarok. That book he does some wicked messed up stuff.
He blows up the inn in the Crossroads, I think. It was either Crossroads or Razor Hill, I don't remember.
I think it was Razor Hill for some reason.
Yeah, like, basically the other, I think they were the other, like, lieutenants or something of Theramore. I forget, but, like, they were talking trash on Garrosh, and they got killed for it, so... That's just a small example of, like, how terrifying Garrosh's regime as Warchief was. Like, give Thrall some credit, at least the guy wasn't like, if you're talking trash on me, I'm gonna have you killed. Like, I think Thrall was actually aware of how many, like, just did not really respect him because of how much he was for peace, but,
And then Garrosh, too, like, at the end of his reign, was, like, executing Darkspear in the streets, Theramore citizens, like, it was really dark stuff.
Yeah, and it's, you know, I know the whole point that you're talking about, where Garrosh basically let some citizens go, that was made worse because in Siege of Orgrimmar, those very citizens are, like, forced to fight each other, and they're screaming about where their children are.
Oh, and that's the same like, citizens? I actually never knew that.
They are called Theramore citizens.
Oh,
and they're
wonderful.
Like, where is my baby? So that's to show you just how terrifying and messed up Garrosh was. I know a lot of people love him. I like him too, but he is a twisted motherfucker.
He is a great villain. That's the word for him.
I'd say that he has a tragic, not even tragic, like, I think a lot of the people just really, like, they cling on to the fact that he could have been great, which is true. In other timelines, he was the greatest Warchief, apparently. But our Garrosh is the Garrosh. Like, realistically, we are the main timeline, so that's how Garrosh was supposed to be, sadly. And when you think about it, it's probably a good thing that he went bad, because if he never went bad, we would have never gotten to the Dark Pantheon as early as we did.
And that's true.
Garrosh needed to fall, basically, for us to stop the Legion, which is kind of funny.
So, in an effort for Skull to be pissed at me, we're going to end Garrosh's segment on Garrosh did nothing wrong. On to Vol'jin.
I hate you all. I hate that quote so much.
If you guys make it this far, please type Garrosh did nothing wrong in the description for Skull.
I'm going to dislike all your comments.
But anyway, on to Vol'jin. Yes. Do you want me to do the Vol'jin recap, or would you? Because this is going to be very short in his reign of Warchief.
You go ahead and do Vol'jin, because I know how much you like Vol'jin. I'll talk about Sylvanas, because I love her.
So, as many of you know, the Vol'jin segment, compared to Garrosh and Thrall, is going to be like 2 minutes long. So at the end of Siege of Orgrimmar, we get an incredibly badass scene where Vol'jin is named Warchief of the Horde by Thrall. I actually love the moment too, in the book War Crimes, where Vol'jin writes that letter to Jaina, and it was weird because like Jaina was like kind of forgiveful in that moment, and then in WoD she wasn't. But I thought that was a really nice moment in War Crimes. But fast forward to Warlords of Draenor, we see Vol'jin in patch 6.1, I believe, or 6.2, appear in our garrison, planning the strike on Hellfire Citadel, or Cathedral, as one of my friends would call it. We have the Vol'jin Spears, I believe, is the group that assists in that effort. And then in Legion, Vol'jin doesn't really get to do much, but I think a really cool scene that we learned about in Battle for Azeroth, which I'm going to incorporate into this part, is Vol'jin was letting citizens hide in Garrosh's bunker when the Legion was attacking Orgrimmar in patch 7.0. Vol'jin is very much like a Thrall-type Warchief, although his reign was short-lived, because, spoiler alert, after this, Vol'jin dies at the Broken Shore at the hands of a Felguard. I hate that Felguard for ending Vol'jin's reign that early. And on his deathbed, he basically, something's telling him to name Sylvanas Warchief of the Horde, which was later revealed to be Mazzala in Shadowlands. But yeah, Vol'jin's reign, I think just in a quick thing, I think it's a really big shame that, and I'm glad that Blizzard I'm sure it was planned, but I'm glad that he's back as a Loa now. That being said, I think it's a shame because the storyline with him as Warchief had so much potential, and the build-up in Mists of Pandaria. I was a Garrosh fan, but I was not sad about Vol'jin replacing Garrosh as Warchief of the Horde, because Vol'jin was a leader with honor, a leader that worked for the title. He had a journey to get the title of Warchief throughout Mists of Pandaria. And I think it was a really big misstep killing him on the Broken Shore. If they wanted to do the Sylvanas thing, me and Skull could do a whole nother podcast on this, but I remember he had mentioned, like, Sylvanas kind of being an aggressor towards Vol'jin and having people side with her. I remember you mentioned that, Skull, a while ago, but I guess the TLDR is it's a shame what happened to him, because Vol'jin is a great character. I'm glad he's still around now, though, because Vol'jin's awesome.
Best choice.
Alrighty, so we just finished talking about Vol'jin and how he was done dirty, but I think this transitions nicely into who he made Warchief in Legion. And I will let Skull talk about his favorite Warcraft character, favorite lover of Bannerac Bladesnaw, Sylvanas Windrunner.
That is a totally accurate and true statement. There are no lies there. Yes, there is. Okay, so Sylvanas Windrunner, going into her good old story. So as we talked about, she was positioned in by Vol'jin as Warchief in his dying last moments, although he wasn't entirely in his right mind during that point. He was basically influenced by Muzala to make her Warchief, which I always thought was interesting, and I thought that I think they should have done a little bit more than that, but it was cool to see them kind of focus on that in Shadowlands, which we won't really talk too much about. But, so yeah, Sylvanas was named Warchief by Vol'jin, but also by Muzala, and I guess by technicality by Zolbold. But Sylvanas became Warchief, and for the most part, she wasn't too bad in her initial few steps. She promised to avenge Vol'jin, avenge those who fell to the Legion, and all that. So at the start, it was actually a pretty good moment for her. But as time went on with her, and yeah, she recruited the Illidari and stuff like that too. But as time went on, she started to show her true colors again, as she typically does. As Sylvanas Windrunner, the Banshee Queen. She instead wanted to focus on the Forsaken's future, which, if you weren't familiar with, the Valkyr were so important to the Forsaken's future, to the point where she basically led a mission to Stormheim where the origins of the Valkyr were more well known. And while the original goal was to get one of the Pillars of Creation, instead it really for her became finding a year and taking control of her using this lamp that she got from Halia. And Halia was this death goddess who's got very similar origins, a very similar character to Sylvanas. And but it got botched, the whole thing with trying to get a year, trying to get, a bunch of Valkyr together to keep amassing the Forsaken and make Sylvanas essentially immortal. It got botched by Gen Greymane. And the lantern got broken and a year got away, which, led to Sylvanas basically going to Plan B for her plans to dominate the world. Which that led us into Battle for Azeroth with the Fourth War, where she basically needed to amass as many dead people as possible to empower the Maw, to get her more power. And she did this by burning down Teldrassil, which a bunch of lives were lost. Her original goal was to kill Malfurion, which I'm guessing his animo would have been really a lot in comparison to the people in Teldrassil. I don't know about that. I honestly think that the amount of people in Teldrassil was probably more than Malfurion, but hey, what do I know? So yeah, so she started out her Warchief campaign by essentially genociding a whole race. And she also, prior to this, also killed her own Forsaken who just wanted to reunite with her family, their families. And she also had plans to even kill her own sisters and raise them as undead, which that was actually something that was foreshadowed all the way back during War Crimes, during Mr. Pandaria, where she basically wanted to raise her own little sister, Valera. I think that's her name. Is it Verisa or Valera? I think it's
Verisa. Valera is the assassin.
I
get them mixed. Dude, I literally get them mixed up all the time.
It's the damn V's in their names. Like, they're both elves that start with the letter V. It does not help me at all. Also, Valera actually has a unique model, while Verisa doesn't. That's just sad. Verisa is the only Windrunner sister who does not look unique at all. But yeah, so Sylvanas went on to create the Fourth War by, she started off by destroying Teldrassil, which led to a bunch of Horde leaders opposing her and creating their own rebellions. Bane basically opposed her. It's just like, she just was not really a good war chief in terms and comparison to the other former war chiefs, I guess. A lot could be argued that she was worse than Garrosh, and I'd actually probably have to agree with that statement, just because, like, when you think about it, like, yeah, Garrosh was like, I'm gonna remove everyone who basically opposes me as war chief, which that included the other races within the Horde, but I guess, like, Garrosh's worst few moments was the destruction of the Veil and the destruction of Theramore. With Sylvanas, it's like she blatantly sent people to die to N'Zoth and Ajara. And then also, she did the whole Teldrassil incident. But going forward, she basically had plans with Queen Ajara, and their plans basically were to unite, and Ajara was to kill all of the champions of the Horde and the Alliance that she basically sent down to Nazjatar, and Ajara was to kill N'Zoth. And that got botched badly by us. We basically curve stomped Ajara, and Ajara did not have time to actually kill N'Zoth, and N'Zoth got free and collected Ajara and went off to Ny'alotha to get blasted by the Heart of Azeroth later on. But proceeding after this, Saurfang, who'd been basically the main rebel against Sylvanas, led the charge and died, basically outing Sylvanas as the person that she truly was, where she basically did not care for the Horde, and she didn't really, in real honesty, care much for the Forsaken. I mean, she really, in a very similar way of Garrosh, she only cared about the Forsaken who agreed with her.
So I think, like, that's, like, I thought that, like, was the most sad part of her story. I think it was, like, actually really sad to see Banner Lady in the cutscene, like, make that face when she said that. Because I think, like, too, like, a lot of Forsaken players, like, really like Sylvanas. So, like, hearing the character say that is, like, just feels like a really big, like, betrayal from her as a character,
It makes sense, though, because
it does.
From as early as even before Cataclysm, Sylvanas had just this feeling of, she had the same sort of feeling towards the Horde that she had with the Forsaken, where basically the Horde were a means to an end. It was basically to achieve her goal to kill Arthas, and the Forsaken were very much the same vein of that. She didn't care for these people. And in Cataclysm, it kind of was a moment where she was slowly growing to like and care for these Forsaken more, but I think in the same vein of her family betraying her, she probably felt betrayed by the Forsaken that chose the Horde over her. I think Sylvanas really underestimated how much familiarity and acceptance the Forsaken probably felt within the Horde compared to the rest of the world. Like, Sylvanas did her duty to free them, but when you think about it, it makes sense that the Forsaken would feel more comfortable and feel more safe within the Horde as a faction than just Sylvanas. Like, if you basically pointed a gun at the Forsaken and were like, it's me or the Horde, I honestly think that it makes sense that the Forsaken would choose the Horde.
Especially after, like, all they've been through with the Horde.
Yeah, and I keep thinking back to this one moment in Borean Tundra where there's this one Forsaken who just felt really honored and like happy that Sarfang showed up to save him and the Horde hero at the time. And
was that the guy at the farm?
Yeah.
Yeah, I love that quest.
I love that quest. That's a great quest that just showed the badassery of Varrock Sarfang. God, everything that guy did was just cool. But I just really like that moment. I know we're talking about Sylvanas, and it's really hard for me as someone who's not exactly the biggest fan of her. But Varrock Sarfang basically showed that he cared more about the Forsaken than Sylvanas did, because there's that moment at the very start of Reckoning where he basically looks up at the gate of Orgrimmar, and there's Forsaken just staring up at him, you know, with weapons and arms and everything. And he's the one who calls them brothers and sisters. Like, he's the one who sees them still as family, which is very, I think, interesting in terms of the Horde, because I think that a lot of the story beats that we get with most of the Horde has always been like the Horde hate each other.
Right.
But that was one of the rare moments where Varrock was like, no, I care about them, and I'm going to fight for them. I'm going to die for them. He outright said he was going to be... I think he knew he was going to die, and he was fine with that, because in Varrock's eyes, the Horde mattered more to him than his own life, which is such a great contrast to Sylvanas, because Sylvanas definitely cares more about her own life than the rest of the Horde and the Forsaken. So it's just...
Wow,
it's a really great contrast for those characters.
I never put that, like... I love that storyline, but I never put that connection together. That's really cool, actually.
Yeah, I mean, Anduin was the one who even, like, prompted the message of Varrock to Sarfang of, what kind of Warchief are you going to be when this is all over? And I think Sarfang even knew back then that he wasn't going to be the one to bake it. I think he knew that he was going to die in the end. I think that he had a plan in mind from the get-go. I think that because Sarfang was familiar enough with Sylvanas to, you know, basically push her buttons. But that's basically the end of Sylvanas' reign. She flew off after killing Varrock Sarfang, rejected the Horde, rejected the Forsaken, rejected everyone basically, and went off to serve the jailer.
So what would you say her legacy was? Because we did that for the other three in the Horde.
Ironically, I think that Sylvanas' legacy was probably the most important, because it finally got all the colors ticked. It got everyone kind of their brains basically in line with one another, that the Horde doesn't need a Warchief anymore. Mm-hmm. The Horde can live on and thrive without a core leadership like the Warchief. Sarfang was the one who basically said that the Horde will endure, the Horde will survive, and yeah, it's true.
It's even better now, arguably.
It's better now. I'd argue with the council. I think that Sylvanas' legacy really is just the end of the Warchief legacy. It's done. It's no longer needed. It's no longer necessary. And now we have a council which is far better and far more likely to not fall apart like the Warchief kind of did.
And would you say she left a good legacy on her time, or a bad legacy as her time as Warchief?
She definitely left probably one of the worst legacies in terms of the Warchiefs. Sarfang was like, this rivals Garrosh, this rivals Blackhand. I'd argue that Sylvanas was as close of a Warchief to basically Gul'dan in the Ultimate Timeline.
Yeah, when you think about it, with how sneaky she was and stuff, like, yeah.
She's a schemer. And I like her for being a schemer. She's great for that. That's her whole character, is she's a scheming, dark lady. And that's her name, the Dark Lady. So, yeah, I think that Sylvanas is probably one of the darkest and one of the worst Warchiefs, sadly.
One of the scariest, to be honest, too, because she very much knew, I would say, unlike Garrosh, how to not alienate her allies. Think of how many people were still with her in the Fourth War.
Yeah.
That's a scary thing.
I didn't even get to bring that up. Like, she basically did a really good job of giving people what they wanted, because the Horde, at the end of the day, really does hate the rest of the world.
You know what line I love from Sylvanas, actually, in BFA? After Rastakan's death, when she's talking to Bane, and he's like, well, maybe we could, perhaps make negotiations with the Alliance. And then she's like, you dare speak of negotiations when the Zandalari king is dead. I forget the exact line, but you know which part I'm talking about.
No, I get what you're saying.
I actually liked Sylvanas in that bit. She has moments where she works. I think that it's very interesting because she's very much a contrast to so many of the leaders within the Horde. I mean, you look at G Firepaw, you look at Bane, you look at Thrall, you look at Vol'jin, you look at so many other leaders, and she's so different. And it's good that she's different, but it's also bad because she just really doesn't have this mindset where she can trust really anyone. Her whole thing, I think, is she just cannot trust people. I think she caused the most death out of any Warchief. Canonically.
Oh, definitely.
And that's like, I want to get into the rankings.
Well, maybe Ner'zhul. Maybe Ner'zhul's one that did that because he did destroy a whole planet. So
that's fair, but like the Horde Warchief.
Oh yeah. So in terms of the Warchief, are we only counting the World of Warcraft Warchiefs?
Yes, just the World of Warcraft.
Okay,
Horde Warchiefs.
that might have been something we should have cleared up earlier on.
So like Thrall, Vol'jin, Garrosh, and Sylvanas. And by the end of this, you and I have to come to an agreement. But I would say, in terms of ranking, okay, this is what I think after talking to you about it, and my reasoning behind this, is kind of honor ability is the way I'd rank this, right? So I think it's obvious that Thrall was the best Warchief the Horde had. I believe the second best Warchief, although short-lived, was Vol'jin. I wish he got to do more, but I think him as a character embodies what the Horde's about, the heart of it. Awesome dude. And then the tough one, because I think a lot of people argue which one was worse for the last two. But I'm a little biased in saying I think Garrosh was better than Sylvanas. But I don't know. It's tough. Because I think Teldrassil is pretty damn heinous as an act.
It's one of those things where you gotta think about, what do you... In terms of victory, that's where things get a little more dicey.
Yes. We could do two rankings, too. Victories and then, what we think. Would you agree with that ranking, Skull, for,
Oh, I would. That is basically my list. Yours and mine are basically identical, which is kind of scary, but at the same time... The thing about... That's the tragic thing about Vol'jin is he probably wouldn't rank very high on my list in terms of the Warchief just because he didn't get to do much. I honestly think he could have been a really great leader and a really great Warchief, but it's the fact that he is so... He really didn't get to do anything. He's Warchief for a minute, basically.
It sucks because the build-up in MoP was so good to him, too.
I think we really should have just had Vol'jin been a part of the... I know this would have been very controversial, but I would have loved to have seen Vol'jin join Thrall in their mission to find Garrosh in Warlords of Draenor.
I think that would have made sense. That would have made sense.
I think that the main thing would be, well, you're the Warchief. You have to stay behind on Azeroth. I think that it would have been a great way to kind of segue and foreshadow that the Horde needed to become a council, because you could basically have Vol'jin be like, let the Horde kind of lead itself while I'm gone. You and me, Thrall, we need to do this. I think that would have been far more interesting.
I have a cool idea for that too, Skull. So say the Muck-Ra went different, and for some reason Thrall just couldn't find it in himself to finish Garrosh. Wouldn't it have been kind of cool if remember Vol'jin has that line where he's like, I'll pierce your dark heart, Garrosh. Thrall won't finish him, but Vol'jin's no, we have to do that. You know what I mean?
I think that
I could see Vol'jin doing that. I think
that would be... It would be a really good way to kind of segue too into Thrall and his feeling of, betrayal and dishonor basically in those moments of using the elements. I know it's such a very it's still a very controversial thing where basically people say Thrall cheated for using the elements. Garrosh fought honorably. I've made so many videos talking about why that wasn't really a moment of cheating, because Thrall and Garrosh have thrown lightning and fists and whatever have you in their Makaras prior, and Garrosh never really batted an eye or questioned it back then. But I think in this moment that would be a lot more vocal, because basically it makes sense too for Vol'jin to do this. Basically, Vol'jin has a very similar past and very similar history where he just kind of stood on the sidelines and let people die. With Karen. Karen died to Garrosh. Vol'jin could have stepped in and stopped Garrosh from killing Garrosh killing Karen, but he didn't, because that's not the honorable thing to do in a Makara. But in this sort of situation, Thrall is pausing. Thrall is not doing what he needs to do, and Garrosh is gonna kill his best friend. So Vol'jin does the only thing he thinks he can do, and he would, step in and kill Garrosh. Which Thrall would be like, "You've dishonored me. You've done a terrible thing, Vol'jin." And Vol'jin would be like, "I had to do what I had to do."
That would have been an incredibly juicy moment in the story.
Now I want to do a what if Vol'jin went with Thrall to Draenor.
I was literally just thinking that would be a good video. Like, that actually sounds like...
That might be my next video after the Rexar one.
Skull, that literally sounds like it would be better than what we got. Like, honestly.
I have this bad habit, and I don't necessarily agree with the statement of your ideas are better than Blizzard's, because I don't want that ego to get to my head, but that would just be really cool, because you'd have more Vol'jin be... Like, my idea would be Vol'jin would get more of an idea of what the Horde is about and what built it.
Picture, say they did kill him at the Broken Shore still, but, right before that, the coast in Durotar, we get a scene of him and Thrall, like Thrall forgiving him, saying, he knows it or something, right before his death. That would have been better. That would have been better.
We could have had a second situation where Thrall and Vol'jin have an argument before he dies, because Thrall had the same thing with Karen.
Thrall's arc could have arguably been the same too, that we got.
It really could have.
That, but it would have been more fleshed out, I think, and it would have given Vol'jin more of an arc before his death too.
I'm still upset that we didn't see Thrall at Vol'jin's funeral.
Yeah, I know.
I don't know why they did that. I'm still questioning if they just forgot to put him in, or could he just not, make it because of the emotion of losing yet another brother? I really want them to kind of... That's why we need another Chronicle. We really need another Chronicle to fill up the gaps that are missing there, because I want to know where Thrall was during Vol'jin's funeral and stuff like that. If it's a shame... It's a shame that we won't be getting a BlizzCon for a while, because that's the question I want to ask. Where was Thrall during that funeral?
Honestly, though,
but
I will
probably
say...
we probably are rambling on. We probably...
I guess we'll close it down with victories. Which Warchief had the most victories? Would you say?
Okay,
Skull?
yeah.
Because I'll probably agree with you. I actually think Garrosh had the lead. No, he had a few. Technically.
He had a few. I think Vol'jin probably had the least, sadly.
Yeah.
Vol'jin would have the least, so it would probably go... this is going to be very controversial, I think. Sylvanas, Thrall, Garrosh, and then Vol'jin. I think that's what it would be.
Thrall did lead the charge against the Lich King, though, and all the stuff from Warcraft
maybe
3.
Thrall would be number one still in terms of victories, because he has a lot under his belt, is the thing.
Yeah.
So I think it would go Thrall, Sylvanas, Garrosh, and then Vol'jin in terms of victories. And then in terms of who was the most honorable and fair or good leader of the Horde, it would go Thrall, Vol'jin, Garrosh, and then Sylvanas.
I think that is perfect. And I will say, Skull, before we wrap down, I want to hear everybody's thoughts if you made it this far, if you disagree with us. Let us know if that list sucks. If you disagree, if you think Sylvanas was the best, Garrosh was the best. We love hearing about that stuff.
If you think Vol'jin was the best, I want to know why.
you can swear at us. We don't care. We're good with that.
You can try. I swear, if you people say Thrall cheated, though, I'm hunting you down, and I'm gonna make you eat KFC.
But I guess to wrap down, because I think with the episode, we could do another episode just on this. The council is an incredible path forward, and one of the points of this is wondering, like, will the title of Warchief return someday to the Horde and the council? Can it return? Will it be Thrall? Who will it be if they do it? That's the question we have to ask ourselves.
This is one of the things that's been bothering me since so I am going to be touching on a little bit of Shadowlands lore. So in the end of the campaign with the Necrolords and all this other crap, Draka is made as the new sort of leader of the Chosen, which are kind of like these honorable warriors in Maldraxxus.
The Baron, right? Is that her title?
No, not Baron.
Oh.
What is it called? I'm trying to think. I don't know the new title. It's what Crexus was.
We'll call her the Crexus, the Maldraxxus. That.
I'm sure it'll come up to me, and you can always put it on the screen what the title is, or I could look it up right now real quick if you want. But anyways, Draka gets this new title, and Thrall and Draka kind of talk a little bit about the future of their entitlements, and basically, and Thrall seems to be getting like some kind of idea in his head of what he wants to do as when he gets back home. And I almost felt like that was a foreshadowing of Thrall coming back to either become Warchief again, or he's got another idea in his head. And it's foreshadowed, and I want to know what that is. Because it feels like they're setting something up big for Thrall when he comes back. And I don't know what that will be. It just seems like that's what they're doing.
I think, yeah, I agree with you that it seems like, especially with all the focus he's getting in Shadowlands, we'll be getting something for him.
I mean, he's wearing the Doom Plate again. It's one of his best looks, by the way. We actually, Mainbox actually called it, like, way before the new model came out, where Thrall was wearing the Doom Plate again. And in that video, we actually talked and discussed about whether or not he's going to become Warchief again, because the statue is called Warchief Thrall, which, again, it makes me think that something's going to go down with where Thrall needs to become Warchief again when he gets back. Either something went really bad with the council while they were gone in the Shadowlands, or there's like some form of new reasoning for the Warchief. Like maybe the Warchief is only used during times of war, and they're like, Thrall, you're the perfect one to do this. And because of Shadowlands, because of Draka's like encouragement, he no longer has that doubt with Garrosh. He no longer has that doubt as a Warchief, which makes me think maybe he'll come back. It's one of those things. It's one of those things where I'm not against if it happens, but I do prefer the council, because the council lets all of the leaders kind of shine and not just have one person shine. And I think one of the biggest things that people are very still angry about, I guess, is the focus on Thrall. Like, Thrall gets a lot of focus in Warcraft, and I personally don't have an issue with it, but some other people do.
I do think, in closing, that like Thrall picking up the axe and resenting the title of Warchief would be interesting if after those conversations with Draka, maybe he comes around to it. I don't know. I'm excited to see what they do with the next expansion, because our next topic is going to be about what we would do for a world revamp. This is kind of like, we did this as kind of like a soft reboot episode because it was a good topic, and I always say to Skull, let's talk about Garrosh every week. So
he does want to talk about Garrosh, and I'm over here like saying I want to talk about Rexxar, but you know, it's,
box is always.
I'm sure I'll figure out a way to talk about Rexxar in the next one, considering Exploring Kalimdor is going to come out in December, so that is always exciting.
And Jakai will be back next week too. He wants to be.
Oh yeah, I mean he might bring up I highly doubt if I don't want to talk too much about the episode that's next, but it would be interesting if some of the more Pandaren themed content in World of Warcraft gets revamped, but I have some doubt in that, but just because I just figure that they're going to focus on Eastern Kingdoms and Kalimdor first.
We'll do a segment maybe on like what we think they could do with the Pandaren in those zones.
Yeah, maybe.
It'd be nice
That'd be
if
great.
we got like Tashui or Hawosian zone.
I think for a while you and I have wanted G Firepaw and Asa to do something, and I hope that this new regime within the Horde and the Alliance, with Turalian as the leader of the Alliance, and I'm guessing Lorthamar and Rokon are kind of like the two top dogs within the Horde Council at the moment, I'm guessing, because Rokon's in charge of Orgrimmar, which is a big deal, a big settlement.
I don't see Anduin coming back right away either after all this.
I think Anduin will come back, but I think he's going to be nursing a lot of wounds from what he's going on, basically.
Zobald's Infinity Gauntlet.
Haha.
we're gonna do a machinima. We were talking about the alternate ending of Shadowlands, or the real ending of Shadowlands, where he snaps his finger.
Yep, that's gonna go really well. But yeah, I think that going back to what we were talking about, I honestly do hope the council really doesn't go anywhere. I hope that it stays, and I think a good way of letting like both worlds kind of exist, where there's a war chief and there's a council, where basically the council still exists and actually like outranks the war chief, but like all matters of war are like handled by the war chief themselves. So like Thrall becomes war chief, and like the council has some influence over his actions, but for the majority it's like, you know what you're doing, you're in charge of warfare. That's kind of what I would do maybe, but again, I'm also not opposed to the idea.
Imagine Thrall versus Turalian and Illyria, how cool that would be, though. I
really want Thrall versus Turalian.
Holy shit, just imagine the cinematic.
Because it would basically be Lothar and Ogrim's their students, their apprentices, their legacies.
Maybe that's what they're going for.
Oh my god, that'd be badass. I hope Thrall gets his Doomhammer back too, by the way. I know it's a completely off-topic thing, but...
Hey, if Xalatath can come back, so can Thrall. So...
Exactly.
Or so can Doomhammer Thrall. But anyway, we're going to wrap it down. Skull, thank you so much for being on this week. We've had a lot to say. This is like an hour-and-a-half episode, actually.
Oof, we did it again.
It is okay. This is good for people if they want to listen to it in the background. But let us know what you guys think. If there's a topic you want us to cover, if you thought this was good, if you thought it sucked, let us know in the comments below. And we will see you next time.